Paper 1, Section B. This is a video guiding you through how to approach Paper 1, Section B for the GCSEs in English language. Before we begin, you might want to download the example paper, which you can do by clicking on the link below this video. Paper 1, Section B assesses your writing skills and is focused on writing a short story. The exam paper will give you a selection of 4 possible prompts for your story, and which we'll go through in a moment. You will have 45 minutes to write your story. You should aim to spend 5 minutes planning and thinking through your story, 35 minutes writing it, and a final 5 minutes checking it carefully. Many students run out of time for this section, so it may be beneficial to do Section B of Paper 1 first. It's up to you. Do try to keep the time though. The section is worth 40 marks in total, which equates to 20% of the overall final grade. The marks are split between content and organisation, which is basically assessing how good your story is, and technical accuracy, which is spelling, punctuation and grammar alongside vocabulary. Here's a set of title prompts from a past paper. You can expect that there will be a prompt which will be a title, another which will be a recount, i.e. an event that's happened to you in the past. There will be a task where you are given either the first or final line of your story. And then there will be a fourth task, which will be either another title, recount, or opening, closing line. In this case, it's one where you are given the final line. Now, after 7 years and having marked tens of thousands of stories, the examiners have managed to identify what makes a good exam story. You only have 45 minutes, so the key to success is to keep it simple and straightforward. You can achieve this by having a limited number of characters, 2 or 3, a single setting, and a plot with one main event. You might be reassured too that stories with a good old-fashioned beginning, middle and end work best. And given the limited time you have, you should aim to be writing around about 500 words. What this looks like on the page will depend on the size of your handwriting, but for most people this will be around 2+ sides. Here's some more specific advice. Write in the first person. This will make it easier to inject some personality into your narration. Imagine that you really are telling the story to someone. On a related note, make sure you write I as a capital I. Many students switch between tenses, which is not only grammatically incorrect but also confusing. Stick to the past tense. The vast majority of stories are told in this tense. A simple way of showing off is to begin your story at or near the end and then tell it in flashback. This also means that you have to know how your story will end before you start writing. No surprises for working out that word choices are important, but it's not just descriptive choices of words like adjectives, but also verbs. There's a big difference between the person who shuffles into a room and the one who marches into a room. Similarly, focus on details. For example, if a character is reading a book in your story, what's the book called? That can tell us a lot about the character. Your reader will get a very different impression of a character who's reading Simon Armitage's collected poems than one reading Katie Price's autobiography. It's tempting to skip the checking part in order to gain an extra 5 minutes, but this is a serious mistake. You're writing under pressure, so the odds are that you've made an error which will have increased. Pay special attention to the basics. Common homophone errors, there, your, etc. Missing capital letters for characters' names, missing apostrophes, comma splicing and incorrect layout of dialogue. Good writers are keen readers. It's still not too late, just, to read a couple of short stories to see how the experts do it. Google flash fiction for teenagers to read some examples. The final tip is to try to have an exam-ready story which you can use and adapt for Paper 1 Section B. If you have that already, then well done, good luck and take care. You're free to stop this video and move on. But if you don't, or you're not sure, then stick around for this part. Coming up with a complete short story in an exam under time conditions is hard. So what follows is some guidance on how you can be one step ahead by having a pre-prepared story outline which is adaptable and can be used in the exam. As you know, you only have 45 minutes to plan, write and check your story, so it needs to be focused, fairly brief and manageable. Think of a story being like an anecdote. An anecdote is a short story, a little retelling of an event of the kind which we often tell friends and family, such as something unusual that happened on the way home or something funny that happened during a science lesson. I'm going to suggest that in the exam you could write a story based around a moment when you fell over. The basic plan goes something like this. Everything begins as normal. You move into another room or area. You fall or trip over for some reason. This leads to a direct consequence before we come to an end or a resolution. Here are 3 examples. Pause the video to read each one. Hopefully you get the idea. They all have one setting, 2 or 3 characters, and can be written within 35 minutes. But the questions change every year, so how would it work in an exam? Let's remind ourselves of the past paper from earlier. We could take the example plan you've just read, the one about falling off the stage during an audition, and apply it to the last task. True, we would have to change the ending so the teacher is amused rather than cross, but it wouldn't be too difficult to do this. Alternatively, task C could work with the crying nephew example plan. Perhaps your mum is driving you to your nephew's home to babysit, which is why you can't stay in your own home alone. Here's the basic plan for that story again. We would need to change the first stage by making it clear that you're being forced to babysit your nephew. However, everything else can be used unchanged. Now, you might be thinking that surely the story is a bit too short, and you might be right. However, look at stage 3. This is the most important part of the story, its climax. For this part, the trip or fall, you need to slow down the moment and tell it in careful, almost extreme detail, like this. Pause the video again and have a read. Imagine the moment of the fall happening in slow motion like in a film. Focus on sound and touch as well as sight. Remember also to vary the way your sentences begin, like in the example here. Done right, this little bit of set-piece writing will impress. There's an excellent example of a story centered around a trip or fall in the link below this video. It was written by a student in a past exam and scored 39 out of 40. Click on the link and read it to see how they too have slowed down the moment of the fall. Notice also how it starts near the end and is told in flashback, which also helps up the word count. I hope it makes things clear and gives you a little inspiration. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck and take care.